Hello, I'm Marty Snyder, and today I'm going to talk about instructional design considerations for traditional online and blended courses. Most of us in higher ed are teaching online and blended courses, and there are some of us who are teaching in a MOOC environment as well. But I'm going to talk about MOOCs and what I've learned from MOOCs by being a participant in quite a few, and how I might be able to apply what I learned to improve my design of my online and blended courses. So really the focus of today's presentation, I'm going to highlight 5 lessons learned from the MOOCs in higher ed and how one might be able to apply these lessons to the design of traditional online and blended courses. So the MOOC. The MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course. MOOC Defined, there are a couple of definitions here from EDUCAUSE, which is more of an operational definition, a model for delivering learning content online to any person who wants to take a course with no limit on attendance. And then Stephen Downes offers a more philosophical definition. He bases his definition of a MOOC on the principle that he's coined called the semantic principle, which consists of the following 4 elements: autonomy, diversity, openness, and interactivity. And so his definition is a way of gathering people and having them interact, each from their own individual perspective or point of view, in such a way that the structure of the interactions produces new knowledge. So why now? Why MOOCs? Now because the technology makes it possible. In particular, the explosion of bandwidth and cloud storage. Early technology, there was unlimited access to the world's most engaging professors and their profound insights. An extensive collection of almost 400 college-level audio-video courses in the great courses, if you've heard of those. So those are actually now on good discount. If you look for the great courses, those were some of the earlier technology. Also earlier technology through MIT OpenCoursework. But there's still, as illustrated by Matthew Plourde, shows that MOOCs can be interpreted in a variety of ways. As a developing model, there are many questions that still exist to what a MOOC really is. You know, what's the difference between an xMOOC and a cMOOC? What defines massive? What defines open, online, or what even defines a course? So in my exploration of MOOCs, I've found that not all MOOCs are created equal. For example, here you've got MIT's edX course, which is what would be considered a content-based course. Here's their artificial intelligence course, facilitated by Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig. And the format here is short video lectures with automated assessments for learners to acquire specific knowledge and skills. So they're provided some video lectures in a very structured format where they take quizzes and assessments to assess specific knowledge and skills. But then getting back to Stephen Downes' vision of a MOOC, here's an example of a network-based MOOC where the focus is on connections with people and building knowledge. Feedback is not provided through automation, but rather through peer assessment. In this particular course, there was a creation of an artifact, so creating new knowledge, and facilitators acted more as orchestrators of content. They would meet with us via Google Groups, and they'd talk about the week's happenings that took place in the discussion forums. But the learners primarily participated in the discussion forums, and they were off on their own developing specific artifacts based on the required readings and videos for that particular week. And the videos weren't created by the facilitators, but in fact they were orchestrated by the facilitators. They put together sort of a module or a package per week of related videos and articles, and then the learners would go and explore on their own. And then another type of MOOC might be the task-based MOOC, which is more time-based than the network MOOC. There are specific assignments that need to get done within 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whereas the network-based MOOC was more open in terms of due dates. There was peer feedback, but there was also self-feedback. And again, the focus was on creation of artifacts. So you weren't taking multiple choice question tests and things like that, automated tests to assess knowledge and skills, but more of you would create this artifact and then you would be assessed by your peers based on a structured rubric that was given to you. And then you've got what's called this mechanical MOOC, and here's one offered by P2PU University. There's no real LMS, no instructor. They believe that the technology is so robust that you don't need it. They use various tools such as OpenCourseWare, Codecademy, for example, to develop coding exercises, and OpenStudy, which is a type of discussion forum tool. And they've created their own open platform or the mechanical MOOC with no instructor. So those are just some examples of the different types of MOOCs that I have found. So there's differences in pedagogy, whether you're focused, whether you're running from a more of an instructivist perspective, or constructivist, or even connectivist type perspective. There are differences in assessment. They can be automated, such as tests with automated feedback. They can be crowdsourced feedback with peer review. And then also you have self-assessments. And then finally, there's a difference in openness. Are they free and available to everyone, or are there certain MOOCs that are only available to a certain population, which doesn't necessarily make them a MOOC anymore because they're not open. Here's a nice diagram of the sort of the MOOC environment. It shows some the four key players here in the center. You've got Coursera, Khan Academy, MIT's edX, and then Udacity, which is founded by Sebastian Thrun, who, since this presentation was given for the FDLA conference, has moved on to the corporate world because of what he found with San Jose State University and the failure with his implementation there. So anyway, it shows here the different venture capitalists who are supporting MOOCs, nonprofit organizations. You see Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation here providing support to Khan Academy and edX. So it gives you an idea of the MOOC space. Now, since I did mention I was talking about instructional design, I wanted to give those of you who may not be familiar with instructional design a couple of definitions. Instructional design, here it says Reiser and Dempsey define it as a system of procedures for developing education and training curricula in a consistent and reliable fashion. And then you've got Spector, who defines instructional design as being concerned with identifying the conditions, meaning the environmental factors and technology, the methods, meaning the instructional approaches and strategies that will optimize the learning outcome for a typical learner. So bottom line, instructional design is about using a systematic process to create an environment that supports the learner in acquiring specific knowledge and skills. So again, none of these buzzwords, MOOCs, adaptive learning, competency-based education, is a panacea, and not every student is appropriate. So instructional design really focuses on what is the type of content that you're trying to convey, who's the learner, what is the best delivery method, etc. The purpose of designed instruction is to activate and support learning of the individual student. And one of my favorites here by Gagné and Briggs, instruction for the support of learning must be something which is planned rather than haphazard. So based on these operational definitions of MOOCs and instructional design, online and blended learning, and traditional, I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned, or in some cases relearned, about how to go about designing learning for a fully online and blended learning environments. Again, I'm hoping that by sharing these ideas, it'll spark discussion about online learning as a whole and the issues pertaining to the design of online learning. So here we have the definitions of an online course, a blended course, and a traditional course. And these are my operational definitions. Of course, there are also offshoots of the MOOC, and one of my favorites that I found recently was the SPOC. which it seems that given the popularity, we might also call the traditional online course the SPOC, the small private online course. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, and these are the types of courses that I teach, small private online courses. Sometimes they're blended, sometimes they're fully online. So lessons learned. Let's begin. Number 5, embrace open. Don't be bound by the walls of your LMS, your learning management system. Students of all ages are connecting everywhere via Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Think about the ways that we can break down the walls of our own classrooms and reach out to a more global learning environment. One of the most interesting experiences that I had participating in a MOOC was the relationships that I made with students from other countries. So how can we make our classrooms more open? You know, whether it's a guest lecture, opening up to different blogs, posting information on YouTube or wikis that are outside of the LMS to encourage students to share their ideas with a broader audience and connect with those who have similar interests beyond the classroom. So my question as an instructional designer would be, how can we design for that? Speaking of the MOOC Classroom, this is an illustration that shows where the students were in a MOOC that I participated in called Education and Digital Cultures. It was offered through Coursera. It had 40,000 registered students. About 3 weeks into the course, there were 7,000 active participants. I'm not sure how many completed, but given the standard statistics of 3 to 5%, I would say about 200 to 350 students finished. So so when we're thinking about embracing open, this is what we're talking about. And even though it was an open classroom, here's a screen capture of the Google Hangout lecture. Not lecture, it was really a discussion. And this is one of the facilitators, and then you've got the other facilitators, and they were participating from Edinburgh. And we had Twitter feeds, and we had Facebook posts, and also we were chatting on Google Hangouts. But it kind of shows, it's interesting, if you can see back behind the screen, you can see out my window and the Miami palm trees out in the back. Actually, that looks like an oak tree in the back. But then if you look at their screen and where they are, this looks like one of the, like Jen Ross's office behind her. And so it makes the open and the massive seem to be a little bit more intimate. Number 4, don't be afraid to experiment. This there are so many resources that exist beyond the course design. So take advantage of these resources. One of the important roles of the designer in today's environment, and even the role of the faculty member and instructor, is that of orchestrator. There are so many resources on the web. The key, knowing how to put together the media-rich combination of relevant articles, videos, audio clips into a module or package that supports a particular learning objective. And I think that's what companies are actually doing now. For example, Pearson, they're working as designers in that regard. In addition to distributing textbooks, they're also providing this type of instructional design and orchestration support. So when we think about design, we have to be agile instructional designers and experiment with different media and methods. Design for the human touch. Human touch trumps high tech. There will always be a need for humans to make connections with people. So technology has just enabled us to do that more easily, regardless of whether one is designing online, blended, or MOOC course. Think about the touch points throughout the course, starting with your introduction, your persona online, the type of feedback that you give. How will you connect with your online students? Just as important as it is in a face-to-face classroom, it's important to make those connections with your students. What are the ways that you can establish social presence in an online learning environment? A distinguished or superstar professor alone that we see often in MOOCs does not make an effective learning environment. So John Dewey says education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. There's more to the college experience than instruction. So, and online isn't for everyone. In my opinion, a blended model seems to work best, one that leverages the large-scale lectures online followed up by a more intimate conversation with the faculty and students. So, getting to designing for the human touch, as a designer, we think, what are the touch points in your online or blended classroom? I'd like to share with you a particular model. This is the for learning. This is called the Community of Inquiry model. Some of you may be familiar with it. Each of us has our own philosophy about teaching and learning, and this philosophy influences the way that we design instruction, whether we're instructional designers or faculty members. But I think it's important that each of us think back and reflect on our own experiences, both as a learner and a teacher. And these experiences, as well as our educational background, can influence our perspective on what online learning should look like. So for me, having a socio-constructivist philosophy, I have found that this model, the community of inquiry, is a useful guiding framework. The COI, theoretical framework, represents the process of creating a deep and meaningful learning experience through the development of these three interdependent elements. You've got social presence, which refers to the ability of learners to project their personal characteristics into the community through presenting themselves as real people. Then you've got cognitive presence, and this is the extent to which participants create meaning through sustained communication. And teaching presence, finally, refers to the design, the facilitation, and the direction of cognitive and social processes. So when these three presences are being used or being I guess, embodied and instantiated, so to speak, you have that's where the sweet spot of the educational experience exists, and that's why we've got this Venn diagram here, and you've got the educational experience in the middle. You've got to have a good combination of these three presences, and there are certain things that we do as instructional designers and facilitators to create this type of community of inquiry. So enough about the COI, but the overarching question that guides my design effort is how can I use technology effectively to design for a community of inquiry? All right, number 2, inspect what you expect. Or in other words, apply learning analytics at the course level. Learning analytics, the definition from Wikipedia, is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their contexts for purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. So a lot of data mining is going on right now in the MOOC environment, and every person who signs up for a MOOC could be a human guinea pig, I guess we could equate it to. Companies are collecting a lot of data. So what can we learn from our students from an individual level, course-based level? What is available currently on our LMS that will inform future design decisions? We can use tools like social network analysis to analyze interactions. We can analyze discourse in discussion forums. We can do predictive modeling to determine patterns of student successes and failures. Look what the Khan Academy is doing to create adaptive learning environments. So new agile models of instructional design are needed, and these models that use real-time analytics to adapt instructional and learning environment ad hoc. So inspecting what you expect is really focusing on the data, and it doesn't necessarily have to be big data. It can be little data focused on your particular course. And then last but not least, number 1, stay grounded. As I mentioned, the purpose of designed instruction is to activate and support the learning of the individual student. Gagne and Briggs said instruction for the support of learning must be something which is planned rather than haphazard. So much research in the field of instructional design and development has provided us with research-based theories and models about teaching and learning. So before we get caught up in the hype and all the new buzzwords such as adaptive learning, MOOCs, etc., think about what we already know about sound instructional design. I'm sure you've heard the phrases back to the basics, history repeats itself, and same wine just with a new label. So as I think back about my experiences in instructional design and all the various applications from face-to-face classrooms to online classrooms to blended classrooms to flipped classrooms and now to MOOC classrooms, I feel that there's already so much out there about the hype surrounding MOOCs, and there's so much emphasis for everyone to get on the bandwagon and how that the MOOCs are so great. And I'm not doubting that they are interesting and important. I'm not putting my head in the sand. However, as all the frenzy surrounds me, I find that the best way that I can contribute to my community of practitioners and scholars is through the simple message, and that message is this. As online teaching and learning continue to evolve, we need to build on the foundation of instructional design. So Gagné and Briggs state that the processes involved in an act of learning are, to a large extent, activated internally. However, internal processes may also be influenced by external events, and this is what makes instruction possible. Attention, for example, may obviously be affected by particular arrangements of external stimuli. So here is Gagné's 9 events of instruction. And it says here, as he states, instruction is a set of events external to the learner, which are designed to support the internal processes of the learner. So these are the external processes that you can implement to help facilitate the internal processes of the learner. And so, for example, if you're designing, you might use this very foundational 9 events of instruction to support your design. But also think about different theories or different ways that theories can be improved. Another foundational instructional design model is David Merrill's First Principles of Instruction. And he feels, in fact, that these first principles can cross all instructional design theories and models, starting with a real-world problem. Existing knowledge is activated as the basis for new knowledge. So once you have the real world problem, you activate the existing knowledge to connect it to new knowledge, and then provide demonstration of the knowledge or skills, and then allow for application of that knowledge, and then integration. So this is another helpful design model for those of you who may not be instructional designers, to use to help you think about effective instructional design of your courses. And then finally, we've got David Jonasson, and he states that the goal of the learner is to interpret and solve problems or complete the project. The fundamental difference between CLEs and objectivist instruction is that the problem drives the learning rather than acting as an example of the concepts and principles previously taught. Technology should be ubiquitous and serve as the backdrop for the instruction. Remember Gagné and Briggs, they said learning is haphazard, instruction is planned. So as you plan for online or blended courses, think first about what you want to do, then how you will use technology to support that. So it's not about how we use the technology, it's about how we use our time. So those are 3 different models you might want to study more, look into more, that might help you in your design of instruction or learning for traditional online and blended courses. So some of the questions that I would be interested in learning from you is, what tools are you using to educate, engage, and inspire? How do you use theory to inform your designs? How do you design for the human touch? How do you connect with your students? What are you doing to leverage open learning? How are you using analytics to inform your design decisions? And what have you learned from MOOCs? So that concludes my presentation. Again, this was a presentation given at the 2013 Florida Distance Learning Association Conference, and I thank you for watching.